My biggest concern for them was, and they haven't played, except for Geelong round one, and they probably could have if maybe won. They haven't played a team in and around where they're going to fight for the 8 or a top 4 team. My biggest concern was when it became hard, were they going to miss Jack Viney? And to me, it was answered yesterday. They didn't have anyone that stood up there. They lost their structure. They dominated first quarter. They should have been 3 or 4 up. They couldn't really. They weren't efficient going forward. And once the ball went into their defensive 50, they looked fumbly and they looked panicky. And that Hawthorn really just hung in there. But as we know, the Hawks, they persevered and actually towed them.
Jimmy, do you think that can have a big impact on their season?
Well, it's a failed hurdle, really, for them, because when we saw Richmond win the flag last year, they got over a few hurdles which they hadn't done in a while. They beat Geelong, which Geelong have owned them for recent years. They won interstate. They had some fantastic wins, and you need to do that as far as your progression to get to a top 4 side. To be a really good side, you've got to get over those, call it little mental demons. Hawthorn have owned Melbourne. That's 15 out of the last 16 games. That's dominance over one side, and they failed. And the thing for me is, I don't know whether, and Rocket, you can talk to this a lot more than I can, whether they're a really literal group. It seemed to me they had this game plan all week, and then the conditions were completely different from what you planned, and they didn't make any adjustments. So they were still starting at a centre bounce 10 metres in front of their opponent in the pouring rain. How many goals were kicked out of the goal square where they were beaten out the back in skiddy conditions? They just made no adjustments. Even their own defence, they finally put the spare man back, but he was far too close. In the wet conditions, you can be further back and come up at the ball. Oh, it was time. They got goals scored against them in the exact same way over and over again. There was no adjustment, mate.
Yeah, I would have thought there'd have to be nearly 8 goals that were scored within 15 metres of the goals, which is horrible, really. I mean, you should be able to get them through for a point. You should be able to have a bounce. You should be able to clear it sideways for a boundary throw, whatever the case may be. But they were really fumbling. That was mentioned earlier. They were really jittery in that sort of part of the ground, and those small forwards of Hawthorn really put them under pressure.